Those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. We're glad to be here in New York.
And welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. President Obama kicked off a White House job summit on Thursday aimed at developing a plan to combat the nation's highest unemployment rate in 26 years. Speaking to 130 business leaders, union chiefs, and economists, the president defended his policies, saying they slowed the pace of job losses and helped create economic growth. Obama will deliver a major speech on the economy at the Brookings Institution next week. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, Ben Bernanke defended his record as chairman of the Federal Reserve at a Senate hearing on his nomination for a second term. While Bernanke conceded that some of the Fed's lapses contributed to the financial crisis, he said the central bank's actions ultimately helped save the economy.
Taken together, the Federal Reserve's actions have contributed substantially to the significant improvement in financial conditions and to what now appear to be the beginnings of a turnaround in both the U.S. and foreign economies. Today, most indicators suggest that financial markets are stabilizing and that the economy is emerging from the recession. Yet our task is far from complete. Far too many Americans are without jobs, and unemployment could remain high for some time, even if, as we anticipate, moderate economic growth continues.
Bernanke and the Fed came under heavy criticism for failing to recognize the financial crisis until it was too late, and then using taxpayer dollars to bail out financial giants like AIG and Citigroup. The New York Times reports the hearing provided new evidence of doubt among lawmakers about the Fed's role as the nation's guardian of the financial system. On Tuesday, independent Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont declared that he would try to block Bernanke's approval on the Senate floor by placing a hold on his nomination.
So the very simple question that the American people are asking is, where was the Fed, where was the chairman of the Fed in terms of observing the recklessness, the speculation, the casino-type activities that were taking place on Wall Street, which precipitated this major economic decline? And the answer is the Fed was asleep at the wheel. Bernanke did not do the job that he was supposed to have done. So for that reason alone, Mr. Bernanke should not be reappointed.
At yesterday's hearing, Bernanke defended his record and highlighted the Fed's efforts to tighten financial regulation, like stricter rules on subprime mortgages, tougher capital requirements, and new proposals to regulate executive compensation at banks.
For more on the financial industry and the economy, we're joined at the Democracy Now! Studios by former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer. He also served as New York State Attorney General, where he was known as the Sheriff of Wall Street. We welcome you to Democracy Now!, Governor Spitzer. Well, why don't you start off by talking about how you think President Obama has handled the economy, the bailout, and you can't speak in sound bites.
All right, no sound bites on this show, which is good news, and thank you for inviting me. Let me begin by saying that I think Senator Sanders was wrong in only one respect. It wasn't that the Fed was asleep at the switch. They were actually complicit. And by that, what I mean is that the chairman, Ben Bernanke, and Tim Geithner, when he was the president of the New York Fed, actually built and participated in creating the structure that now has collapsed. And that, I think, is what is so problematic to so many of us. They are now claiming credit for having taken trillions of our tax dollars and given those dollars back to the banks to return them to solvency, when the initial bankruptcy and the initial illiquidity and the initial crisis was very much a consequence of the very policies they put in place. Stepping back for a moment, we have a major crisis in this nation, and that crisis is jobs. That crisis is that we are seeing the elimination of the middle-class job foundation that permits most Americans to do better year after year after year. The reality is median family income has been stagnant for 40 years, and the policies of what I call financialization, which is major banks trading assets back and forth, the Wall Street banks such as Goldman, which is rightly a lightning rod right now for much of what's going on, buying and selling, playing with tax dollars in proprietary trading. They make huge money. Nothing is added to the economy. Jobs are sent overseas, all of this going on simultaneously. That is what our economy has become, and Ben Bernanke and Tim Geithner were the architects of this. And now they're saying, didn't we do a good job 6 months ago giving money to the banks? No. Go back 2, 3, 5 years. Where were they? Tim Geithner over and over bailed out the banks. He was, as president of the New York Fed, the overseer of the institution that collapsed. And so It's akin to going to a doctor who has said, I have a great technique for you. I'm going to bleed you. And he bleeds you, and he gets you more and more sick and sick and sick. Then when you're about to die, he puts a tourniquet on you and says, gee, I'm good. No, your prescriptions have been wrong since the beginning.
And you have been repeatedly critical of especially the portion of the bailout where AIG, a firm that you're very familiar with, that you went after when you were Attorney General for many of its problems, the counterparties, the payments to Goldman Sachs and other institutions that AIG owed money to. Could you talk about that?
And that. The numbers on that one transaction, about $80 billion, are huge, $180 billion total to AIG. But the counterparty transactions, too technical to get into in too much detail, but are symptomatic of the mindset of the Fed. In a sentence, the counterparties, Goldman Sachs, other major banks, were paid 100 cents on the dollar for contracts that AIG had with them using tax dollars. Goldman got a check of $12.9 billion tax money because AIG supposedly owed it to them when the Fed took over AIG, and nobody said maybe Goldman doesn't deserve any money, maybe they don't deserve 50 cents, maybe certainly they don't deserve 100 cents on the dollar. What does this say? It says that when the Fed took over AIG, all they were thinking about doing was protecting the banks. They didn't ask the question. I started writing about this, and you're right, AIG and I had a rather tense relationship. We found the accounting fraud there years ago, said that this is a company that is really in bad shape.
Well, you sued AIG.
Oh, yes, and we got them to confess that and that's when they removed Hank Greenberg as the CEO. Federal criminal charges were brought. Hank Greenberg was called an unindicted co-conspirator. And now he's back in the good graces of Wall Street again, of course, because that's how they handle these issues. AIG was, to a great extent, their financial products division, a Ponzi scheme, supposedly guaranteeing hundreds of billions of dollars of CDS collateral, credit default swaps, with no collateral behind it. That is part of what brought us down, but that is the system that the Fed was overseeing. They specifically rejected the effort back in '94, '95.